The forest held its breath beneath the early morning mist. A gray stillness drifted through the trees, broken only by the rhythmic hum of insects and the occasional drop of dew falling from the canopy above. Then came a sound, faint, uneven, unlike the forest's usual voice. It was soft at first, almost mistaken for a bird, but too fragile, too pleading. A baby gorilla's cry, the kind that echoed fear and weakness, not play. Two rangers paused mid-step, their boots sinking quietly into the damp soil. They had followed faint tracks for over an hour, unsure what they were leading toward. Until now. One of them lifted a hand, signaling silence. The forest around them seemed to listen too. And then, through the screen of vines and broad leaves, they saw her. A mother gorilla, her dark shape crouched low beside a fallen log. Her chest moved in shallow, trembling breaths. Her baby, small and motionless except for the slow lift of its fragile hand, lay cradled between her massive arms. The rangers stood at a distance, watching. The mother's eyes flicked toward them once, deep, glossy, filled with something that looked more like pain than fear. A low sound rumbled from her throat, not threatening but uncertain. Her body was tense to protect, but her strength seemed drained. The infant whimpered again, a broken, breathy cry that made the nearby leaves quiver. One of the rangers whispered, barely a breath, "Easy, girl." His voice was softer than the wind, yet even that small sound caused the mother to shift. She drew the baby closer, pressing her chest against the tiny frame as though trying to lend it warmth through the trembling of her own body. The air was heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth and decaying leaves. Around them, the forest pulsed with quiet life, the calls of distant hornbills, the rustle of small creatures moving unseen. But the clearing remained hushed, as if the world itself understood the fragility of what unfolded there. The rangers knew the signs, the way the mother stayed close to the ground, her movements slow and uncertain, her fur matted with soil. She had been through a struggle, perhaps a birth gone wrong, or a fight to protect her newborn from something unseen. Her breathing carried exhaustion, and her trembling was more than fear. It was fatigue, the kind that seeps deep into the bones. One ranger slowly lowered his pack, not to move forward yet, but to show calm. The other raised binoculars, observing from a respectful distance. The baby's chest lifted erratically. It was alive but weak. The mother's gaze kept returning to the humans. Not a challenge, not surrender, but a question. She made no attempt to flee, though the path behind her was open. Instead, she stayed, rooted by instinct and the weight of her own uncertainty. A soft gust of wind brushed through the clearing, carrying the faint smell of distant rain. The mother blinked slowly, her eyelids heavy. Every few seconds, her hand moved across the baby's back, stroking once, then resting again. Her mouth opened slightly as if to vocalize, but no sound came. The rangers could feel the pulse of tension in the air. The invisible thread between fear and compassion stretched thin. They knew approaching too soon could mean disaster, not only for the humans, but for the fragile infant in her arms. Minutes passed, like hours. The forest's rhythm seemed to pause. No insect hum, no bird call, just the trembling breath of a mother who didn't know if she could keep her child alive. The rangers exchanged a glance. Both knew they couldn't intervene yet. Trust was something earned in stillness, not force. One ranger slowly took a step backward, his motion slow enough for even the breeze to notice. The other stayed, eyes locked with the gorillas. In that moment, something wordless passed between them. Not understanding, but awareness. The mother exhaled, a long, shuddering sigh, and lowered her head beside her baby. The cry quieted. The forest listened again. Above them, light began to filter through the mist, soft, pale, and fragile like the moment itself. The rangers stood in silence, knowing that whatever came next would depend not on their strength, but on her trust. And in the deep, breathing heart of the forest, that trust was still waiting to be born. The air hung thick between the trees, heavy with the scent of damp earth and leaves beginning to rot in the wet season. Every breath seemed slower here, every sound more careful. The rangers stood just beyond the fallen log where the mother gorilla held her baby close. They could see now, even from a distance, how small the infant truly was, its chest rising only in short, uneven bursts. Each gasp came like a fragile thread, barely tethering life to its body. The mother did not move. Her great hands, black and scarred from years of forest life, pressed the child against her chest with quiet desperation. Her fingers trembled each time the baby's breath stuttered. The rangers could feel the tension radiating from her, the kind that speaks not through sound, but through stillness, the language of wild fear wrapped around love. One ranger, older than the rest, knelt halfway between the team and the gorilla. His posture was slow, deliberate. He whispered something that only the wind could hear, his tone not meant for command, but reassurance. The others waited, motionless. None reached for their equipment yet. To move too fast would be to break the invisible thread of trust that had not even begun to form. The mother shifted her weight, her broad shoulders hunched forward. Her nostrils flared, taking in the scent of humans, the foreignness of cloth, metal, and sweat. Her eyes, dark and sharp beneath her heavy brow, flicked between each face, measuring the danger. When one ranger adjusted his footing, the mother released a low, guttural warning. It was not loud, but it carried the depth of something ancient. She was ready to fight if she had to. The baby gave a soft, rasping cry, the sound weak, almost airless. The mother's expression changed, her tension tightening further, her chest vibrating as she held her infant tighter. A moment later, she turned her head slightly away from the humans, curling protectively around the small body as if the forest itself could shield them. A thin string of drool clung to her lower lip as she breathed faster. Not aggression now, but panic. The rangers exchanged a look. They had seen this before, the line between protection and collapse. A mother torn between her fear of losing her child and her fear of what would happen if she let anyone help. The team's medic, a woman who had studied primates for over a decade, exhaled quietly and murmured, "She's terrified." Then softer still, "We have to wait." Patience was the hardest part. The rain began to fall again, fine and steady, clinging to the rangers' clothing and running down their necks. The forest around them came alive with the soft percussion of droplets on leaves, but the clearing remained silent. Time stretched thin. The baby's cries grew fainter, reduced to shallow breaths that barely stirred the mother's chest. She rocked slightly, not rhythmically but in nervous motion, as if movement itself might keep the small heart beating. Minutes passed. The rangers' gear lay untouched. Every instinct in them screamed to act, to step forward, to save what might still be saved. But they knew how fragile this balance was. One wrong movement, one sound too sudden, and she could crush the infant by accident, thinking she was protecting it. The mother's eyes caught theirs again. Mud clung to the fur along her arms, and rainwater streaked her face like quiet tears. Her expression was unreadable, somewhere between defiance and pleading. She shifted her grip slightly, and the rangers saw the baby's tiny hand fall limp for a moment before twitching again. A gasp ran through the group, though no one spoke. The older ranger closed his eyes for a heartbeat, then whispered, "Not yet." "Let her lead." His voice was low, nearly swallowed by the rain. The mother's ears twitched at the sound, but she didn't move away. Instead, she adjusted her hold, pressing the baby closer to her skin, her chest rising and falling faster as if trying to breathe for two. In that fragile pause, the forest seemed to listen. The raindrops slowed, or perhaps time itself did. The humans stood still in reverence, watching a mother's battle between trust and terror, between the wildness that defined her and the love that might destroy her. And as the mist curled low over the ground, no one moved. The moment hung suspended in the quiet heart of the forest, a warning, a plea, and a question none could yet answer. For a long time, nothing moved but the rain. It dripped from the canopy in fine silver threads, collecting in the hollows of leaves and tracing slow paths down the mother gorilla's dark fur. The rescuers remained still, their breaths shallow, their faces softened by the helplessness of waiting. Each second stretched, heavy with fear and reverence, as the fragile rhythm of the infant's breathing grew weaker. The baby's chest now rose only in small, uneven tremors. Its tiny mouth opened soundlessly, reaching for air that no longer seemed to come easily. The mother shifted again, her immense frame trembling with a kind of strength that comes only from desperation. She held the infant closer, pressing her lips to its head in short, uncertain bursts. Not quite kisses, but instinctive motions of comfort. Her nostrils flared. A faint, distressed murmur escaped her throat. The Rangers exchanged glances. Every one of them could see the same truth reflected in the other's eyes. Time was running out. Yet to act too soon would mean losing the fragile thread that held this moment together. The lead ranger, a man whose calm had weathered years of rescue work, lowered his gaze to the earth, grounding himself in the rhythm of the forest. "Stay with her," he whispered to the medic beside him, his voice barely louder than the patter of rain. "Let her decide." The medic nodded, though the waiting gnawed at her. The scent of damp soil filled the air, mixed with the faint musk of fear that every animal carried when pushed to the edge. The mother's breathing quickened. Her chest rose and fell in bursts of shallow panic. She looked at the infant, then at the line of motionless humans, her eyes wide, almost lost. A deep sound began in her chest, a low rumble that trembled through the ground. It wasn't a threat. It was confusion, pain, something caught between the instinct to fight and the knowledge that fighting would not save her child. The rescuers did not move. One raised a slow, open hand in front of him. Not closer, not reaching, only steadying the space between them. Then, without warning, the mother leaned forward and gave a sharp cry. It was brief, raw, and final, as if something inside her had broken free. She lowered her arms. The baby slid slightly down her forearm, its tiny body limp against the wet leaves. Her fingers lingered on the small shape, trembling, unwilling to let go. But then, with a motion so deliberate it felt sacred, she shifted her weight and placed the infant on the ground. The clearing fell silent. Even the rain seemed to pause mid-air. The mother stepped back half a pace, her eyes locked on the rescuers. Mud streaked her face. Her nostrils quivered. Her entire body trembled, not from cold, but from the unbearable act of surrender. The infant lay between them, fragile and still, the faintest rise of its chest visible beneath the damp fur. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The medic swallowed, the taste of rainwater and fear thick on her tongue. Then, with the kind of gentleness born from long years in the field, she knelt, keeping her movements slow, fluid, and small. "It's okay, girl," she murmured, her voice thin and low. "We're right here." The mother did not charge. She did not retreat. Her gaze never wavered as the medic extended her hands and touched the baby for the first time. The infant's skin was cold, its breath faint but still present. The medic felt the pulse, shallow but there. A quiet wave of relief moved through her chest. She nodded once to the others without looking up. The mother shifted again, lowering her head as if to see what was being done. Her breath came in short bursts, misting in the cool air. The rescuers could feel her presence like a weight pressing on their skin. She could end it all in an instant, but she didn't. Her trust, fragile and trembling, held the space together. Minutes passed like hours. The baby gave a weak sound, not a cry, just a small gasp. The medic looked up briefly, her eyes meeting the mother's. Between them hung an understanding that no words could hold, a moment where two worlds touched, not through dominance or fear, but through something far deeper. And then the forest exhaled. The rain began again, soft and steady, carrying away the heat of tension. The rescuers worked quietly, the mother's eyes watching every move. She did not know what they were doing, only that somehow she had chosen to let them. The Rangers would remember this moment for the rest of their lives. The sight of a wild mother who, for the sake of her dying child, placed faith in a world she did not understand. In the soft hum of the rain, her act of surrender became something eternal. Not weakness, not defeat, but the quiet courage of love. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Mist drifted low over the clearing, carrying the soft pulse of distant birds. The rangers moved with the slow, deliberate care of people stepping into sacred ground. Between them lay the fragile shape of a newborn gorilla, its chest lifting in small, uneven breaths, its tiny hands trembling against the earth. Every second felt uncertain, balanced on a thread between two worlds, the wild and the human, life and the fading edge of it. They worked without words, only quiet gestures and the faint hum of equipment. One ranger knelt beside the infant, a soft cloth in her hands, brushing away the dirt clinging to its damp fur. Another adjusted the small oxygen tube, keeping the rhythm of their movements gentle, non-threatening. Each action was a whisper of respect, a silent promise that nothing here would be done in haste. From a few meters away, the mother crouched low, her massive arms pressed into the soil. Her breathing was heavy, each exhale rising in a misty shudder. She watched every movement with the intensity of a storm held still. Her dark eyes flickered from the baby to the hands that touched it, uncertain, fearful, but unwilling to turn away. The earth beneath her hands was torn where she had clawed it, a mark of her restraint, her fight between instinct and trust. The infant stirred weakly, a soft whimper breaking the silence. One of the rangers froze, glancing up toward the mother. She shifted forward, just a step, her shoulders rising, nostrils flaring. The air tightened. "Easy," someone whispered, barely a breath of sound. The woman nearest to the baby paused, then slowly lowered her hand, letting the mother see what she held. A damp cloth, a motion meant only for comfort. The mother hesitated, eyes narrowing. Her muscles trembled beneath her thick coat. The seconds stretched, endless and raw. Then she exhaled, a deep, low rumble that rolled through the clearing, not in threat but in exhaustion. Her gaze softened by a fraction, the faintest sign of surrender. The rescuers moved again, quicker now but still gentle. They checked the baby's breathing, rubbed its chest to encourage movement, whispered between one another in tones that barely rose above the wind. The infant's breath came steadier, though faint. A small sound escaped its lips, fragile, searching, alive. The mother tilted her head, catching that sound like an echo returning from a long distance. Her entire body seemed to lean toward it. One ranger lifted the infant slightly to clear its airway, careful to keep her movements open, visible. The mother growled low, not in rage but warning. Her fingers dug into the soil. "Almost done," the woman murmured. Her voice trembled with something beyond fear. Reverence. For a moment, the mother's eyes met hers. There was no understanding in the human sense, only recognition, two beings bound by something wordless and ancient. The ranger slowly lowered the infant back onto the soft blanket, its chest now moving with fragile rhythm. The baby's hand twitched once, then fell open. The mother's posture changed. Her shoulders eased. She stepped closer, one hesitant stride, then another, the air stirring around her massive frame. The human stayed still. She reached out, her long fingers grazing the baby's side. The soft contact drew a faint chirp from the infant, a tiny sound that broke the tension like light through cloud. The rangers stepped back, their hands lowering in quiet retreat. The mother gathered the baby gently, pressing it to her chest. Her breathing deepened, slow and rhythmic, her body curved protectively around the small, trembling life she had nearly lost. The rescuers watched in silence, eyes wet with the unspoken truth that sometimes the wild allows them close, but never closer than it must. The wind moved through the forest again, carrying the scent of damp soil and new beginnings. The rangers stood still for a long moment, their hearts heavy and light all at once. In that fragile peace, between fear and hope, the forest seemed to breathe with them. The air in the clearing felt lighter, as if the forest itself had been waiting for this single fragile moment. Morning light spilled gently through the canopy, brushing the damp leaves with a soft gold. The rangers stood still, their movements suspended in a shared quiet. The small form on the blanket was motionless, its breath shallow but steady. Time seemed to move differently here, slow, cautious, tender. Then, almost imperceptibly, the infant's fingers twitched. A breath shuddered through its tiny body, and from that fragile chest came a sound. Faint, tremulous, alive. The cry broke the silence like a thread snapping under weight. Every ranger froze. One of them exhaled softly, eyes glistening. Another took a small step backward, signaling the others to give space. "Let her," someone whispered. The group obeyed, retreating in quiet unison until only the mother and her newborn remained within the ring of soft earth. The mother stirred. For a long moment, she didn't move toward the sound, as if she, too, needed to be certain it was real. Her great chest rose and fell, her nostrils flaring as she caught the faint scent of her child in the morning air. Then she moved. Slow, deliberate, powerful. Each step pressed into the damp soil, leaving clear impressions that filled almost instantly with water. The infant gave another small cry, weaker now but insistent. The mother's pace quickened. She paused only once, halfway between the shadows of the trees and the open clearing, her eyes flickering to the humans who stood at the edge. They did not move, only waited, arms low, heads slightly bowed. The forest seemed to hold them all in a single breath. Reaching the baby, the mother lowered herself until her massive frame curled around the fragile life before her. Her arm extended, fingers brushing the infant's side with infinite care. The baby stirred at her touch, a trembling sound caught between whimper and sigh. She gathered the infant close to her chest, her hand cupped over its back, her body swaying in a rhythm as old as time. The soft sound of her breathing filled the space, deep, low, grounding. The rangers watched in silence. They could see her eyes now, glistening in the pale light, and in them something beyond instinct, a flicker of awareness, of comprehension that transcended language. The woman who had knelt by the baby earlier felt her throat tighten. She whispered to herself, "You've got her." It was not meant to be heard, but the words carried in the stillness. The mother adjusted her hold, pressing her face into the baby's fur. The infant moved again, its small hands grasping at her skin. The sound that followed, a soft rumble deep in the mother's chest, was neither warning nor distress. It was the sound of reunion, relief in its purest form. For a moment she stayed like that, unmoving, her body curved protectively around her child. Then, slowly, she lifted her head. Her gaze drifted to the humans standing at the forest's edge. It was not fear in her eyes nor defiance. It was something gentler, a quiet acknowledgement. The distance between them had not vanished, but it had changed. They were no longer intruders, but witnesses. The mother held that gaze for a heartbeat longer, her breath visible in the cool morning air. Then she shifted the baby higher against her chest and turned toward the trees. Her steps were slow at first, heavy with the weight of exhaustion. The baby let out one last small sound, a faint, steady whimper that dissolved into the rustle of leaves. As the mother disappeared into the shadows, the forest swallowed the last of her movement. The only trace left behind was the faint outline of her footprints in the soft mud, filling slowly with rainwater. The rangers did not speak. One of them simply looked toward the line of trees, then lowered his gaze. In the stillness that followed, the wind moved gently through the clearing, stirring the leaves and the edges of the discarded cloth. The light shifted, touching the space where mother and child had stood. Somewhere deep in the forest, a soft, rhythmic call rose and faded, the sound of life continuing, unseen but alive. And for a long moment, the humans stayed there, silent, humbled, breathing in the quiet grace of what they had just witnessed.